Bartolomé de las Casas documents Guatiguaná's famous escape and how absolutely frustrated Colon was with him. By February 1495, we know that Guatiguaná had gathered more warriors and he began operating on the coastline, pushing back all of the Spanish invaders who dared show up near his shore. He would unalive them all as soon as they reached the shore. And if the indigenous people had seen things maybe in a different light, they would have won. They had advantage of knowing the island, of numbers, because they were more than the Spanish that were arriving. They were in the thousands. However, because of their political structure where each yucayeque was independent from the other, Guatiguaná could not gather them to his side. Some of the indigenous people believe that it was fine to ally themselves with the invaders if they were beneficial to them. And even though he tried to explain that these people were horrible, they were doing horrible things, especially to their women, the other indigenous people did not listen. In frustration of not being able to gather up the people he needed to get these invaders out of the island, Guatiguaná decided to attack a small settlement of Spanish settlers. He slaughtered 10 Spanish guards who were protecting 40 Spanish soldiers who had fallen ill. It is believed that this happened in the dead of night. So after slaughtering the 10 guards, he quickly went and he set the wooden structure that they were using for shelter on fire. The 10 guards and the 40 soldiers all perished in the fire. And now Columbus felt that he didn't have a choice. He absolutely had to capture Guatiguaná. But what was the problem? Guatiguaná was a sub-chief of Guarionex. Guarionex, at that moment, was allied with Colon. I read in one description that Colon then made a meeting with Guarionex in order to explain to him why he was pursuing Guatiguaná. He wanted to let him know that it had nothing to do with him. It wasn't personal. He needed to capture this cacique. So Guarionex backed off and allowed Colon to continue in his pursuit. But Colon couldn't find him. He was never able to find this cacique and capture him. So in revenge, Colon chased and hunted his people. And he managed to capture several of his followers and united that group with other groups from other caciques that he had battled. And this group of people were then sent off to Spain as slaves. This was the famous crossing of Antonio de Torres, who left in February of 1495. On this ship were several people that we've already talked about. One of the main ones was Michel de Cuneo, the first Spanish to document the way he violated a young Carib girl. He had decided to return home. He was on this fleet of 4 ships. Michel de Cuneo was considered Colon's best friend. He describes the crossing from La Española back to Cadiz, Spain, as a hellish crossing. He wrote, "About 200 of these Indians died. I believe because of the unaccustomed air, colder than ours. We cast them into the sea." We know that basically only half of the indigenous people survived this trip, and the other half that did survive were severely ill by the time they reached Cadiz. And Michel de Cuneo informed the authorities and said, "For your information, they are not working people and very much fear cold, nor have a long life." These survivors were eventually sold at market, and not one of them survived more than a few months in Spain. Back on the island, Guatiguaná continued to hide from Colon's forces. They were never able to find him. The last we do hear of Guatiguaná is that after La Batalla del Santo Cerro, he makes an appearance. Remember, La Batalla del Santo Cerro was on the 24th of March, 1495. Colón, Bartolomé, his brother, y Ojeda had battled a mix of indigenous forces, and the indigenous forces had lost. We know that 2 days after this battle, Colón, Bartolomé, and Ojeda found themselves face to face with Guatiguaná and a force of indigenous warriors. Because Guatiguaná was up to his old habits again of attacking La Magdalena. So they were already on their way to rescue it. This battle, again, was quick, similar to the Santo Cerro, and again, the Spanish won.
And Guatiguaná was able to evade capture once again.
Couldn't find any other mention of what happened to Guatiguaná after the 26th of March, 1495. What we do know is that he was never captured, and he also was never unalived by the Spanish. It is believed that he continued to fight and was basically one of the first guerreros in the modern sense in the Western Hemisphere. I really enjoyed his story because I felt that it represented really the frustration of the indigenous people, not only against the Spanish, but amongst themselves. If he had been able to get his other, I'm going to say countrymen, even though it wasn't a country at the time, but if he could have gotten the rest of them to side with him, things would have been so different. But he was fearless. And we can be very proud to have learned about his attempts to free himself from this invasion and also to preserve his way of life.